Hi, welcome to Shawn Inman's very first video blog. As you can see by my high-tech studio here and my equipment, well, yeah, okay. I've still got a ways to go on figuring all this out, but I just am looking for another way that I can reach out and talk to readers, and sometimes sitting down and writing a whole 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 word blog can be problematic, so I'm going to try occasionally just setting up the webcam and talking this way. I thought for this very first one we would do kind of a question and answer, so I put out a plea for questions on my Facebook page and got a few questions, and I thought I'd answer those today, and then we'll see how often I'm going to do this going forward, maybe once every couple of weeks or so, depending on how often an idea hits me or if we want to do another question and answer routine. So let's see. First question today came off of a direct message. Are you going to write any more memoirs? Well, maybe. I know there are a lot of people out there who consider themselves just memoirists, and that's what they do. And they're able to write 7, 8, 9 different memoirs off their experiences. That hasn't really been something I've been interested in. I felt like I had one story that I wanted to tell from my life, and I told that story in Feels Like the First Time, and then retold the story from Don's perspective in Both Sides Now. And for me, that kind of covered most of what I wanted to say as far as memoirs, so I don't have any others specifically planned. Instead, what I tend to do is grab events from my life and incorporate them into my fiction. The book that I'm working on right now, which has a working title of The Unusual Second Life of Thomas Weaver, is already incorporating 2 primary things that have already happened in my life and in my family's history, and I'm just taking them and fictionalizing them, and I think I'm more likely to do more of that as we move forward. At the same time, I think I have one more thing I'd like to do with my story that I've covered in Feels Like the First Time and Both Sides Now, and that would be to take them and combine the 2 stories into one. So you could, Chapter 1 might be my perspective on events, Chapter 2 would have Don's perspective, and kind of go back and forth as we tell that story. I get a fair amount of requests for what happened in those intervening years, because in both of the books I essentially leave off in 1979 or 1981 and don't pick up again really until 2009. So obviously there's a lot of life story in there that could be told. For me, those stories of those intervening years just weren't relevant to the story I wanted to tell, and that's why I left them out in the books. Maybe when I write this combination book, which kind of in my head has the working title of Magnet and Steel, maybe when we do that, then we'll cover some more of that interim material. But for now, I'm working on fiction. I have a whole bunch of fiction things planned for this coming year. The book that I'm writing right now is kind of a paranormal time travel story, and I have at least 4 other stories in mind that I hope to be able to get to. I don't know if I'll get them all done this year. Plus, I'm working on putting a compilation together of the love stories that I get from other people. So many times people will read one of our books and send me a message that says, "Oh my gosh, that's so much like what happened to us." And I would enjoy putting together little snippets of those stories and kind of compiling them all into one book, kind of like Chicken Soup for the Soul does, but only be about love stories instead. So that's a project that I'm hoping to be able to put together before the end of the year. And then I've got more books in the Second Chance series that I want to write. The first book of that, Second Chance Love, will be out here in the next few weeks, and then I'm going to kind of morph that into a different direction and tell more stories about Steve and Lizzie, and then I've got 3 or 4 other ideas already pretty well solidified in my head that I want to get to as well. So one of my online friends asked how many characters in Lucky Man were based on people you know. That was the very first fiction that I ever published. Published it exactly 2 years ago, this coming Tuesday, I think. And oddly enough, in that one, virtually none of the characters were from real life. Brett Mann, the protagonist, is just a jerk, and I think people always want to know, who was Brett Mann in your life? Were you writing about me if I knew you back in high school? And no, this is that he was a character I just made up out of whole cloth. Now, there are times that I do adapt people's personalities that I know and inject them into my stories, just because it feels nice to build a persona around somebody that I actually know, so I know how they would react in various situations. But in Lucky Men, those all came just out of my brain. In Rock and Roll Heaven, Jimmy Guitar Velvet, he was kind of an amalgam of all of the people that I met. There was a time in the early 80s when I worked as I misspent a portion of my youth as a roadie with a small-time rock band that would travel around the Pacific Northwest. And Jimmy Velvet is just kind of an amalgamation of all of those characters that I met and knew when I was traveling with the band. So, and in Thomas Weaver, Thomas is definitely a combination of several people that I know in my life. And I think all writers tend to do that. Sometimes you just make people up, and sometimes they're real people. But what I have found is when I base a character on somebody, they never recognize themselves in it. I just don't know how self-aware we all are that we can read about ourselves in the pages of a book and recognize ourselves. So my friend Chip, who is a character in Feels Like the First Time in Both Sides Now, sent me a question that says, do you have a childhood sweetheart? If you've read either Feels Like the First Time or Both Sides Now, you know the answer is, of course, that was Dawn, and now we're happily married and going on our fifth year of our marriage, and life is very good that way. And that's another question I get a lot. When people first discover our books, they'll send me a tentative email that says, oh, please tell me you and Dawn are still together, because if you're not, I wouldn't know what to believe. So Dawn is still happily putting up with me every day. And the thing people want to know more than anything else probably is, are you keeping your wedding vows? And if you read the book, you know that my wedding vows included taking care of all spiders in the house, which I do, getting things down from high shelves because Dawn is a little vertically challenged, and yes, I still do that for her. And mostly I take her first cup of coffee in the morning as part of my wedding vows, and as a portion of self-defense, because honestly, Dawn doesn't want to talk to me until after she's had her first cup of coffee in the morning. So thank you for that question, Chipper. Another question I got today that I get a lot of is, when are we going to see such and such made into a movie? I get that a lot about Feels Like the First Time and Both Sides Now, and occasionally about questions like some of the Second Chance books, or Christmas Town, which I think Christmas Town would be such a good, like a Hallmark movie or a Lifetime movie. It would be easy to film. But the reality is I'm an independently published author, which means that my connections in the movie business and the like are non-existent, and I have no idea how to contact anybody to attract interest in any of the stories. So I believe that Feels Like the First Time has been bought and downloaded now over 250,000 times, and I just keep hoping that one of these days, one of those 250,000 copies of Feels Like the First Time will fall into the hands of somebody that'll say, hey, I could make this into a movie. But so far, nothing. But I do think that I tend to write in a fashion that could be pretty easily adapted into screenplay and into movies. I always think the best movies are adapted from shorter works. If you're adapting a 400-page novel into a 2.5, 3-hour movie, you have to cut out so much of it that I think that shorter works, like I say, like with Christmas Town or some of the Second Chance series or something like that, would be an easier adaptation. So I did get a question from somebody about how to publish a book. and how do you format it and that sort of thing. Well, I'll tell you, I am definitely not an expert in formatting, because I hire someone to do my own formatting. I just send them a Word doc and they format it for publication. If you're interested in publishing your own book, one, I encourage you, drop me an email or a Facebook message, and I'm happy to talk to you about the process. I help a lot of people get started in publishing things. The thing I would have to ask you is, are you writing a book just for yourself and your family, or are you writing it to try to get that story out into the world and get broader audience for it? If you're just writing it for yourself, it's a pretty easy process. You can essentially just format the document pretty easily, upload it to like Amazon KDP, and even CreateSpace if you want paperback copies, and do it print on demand. If you're really serious about trying to get an audience for your book, though, what I recommend is that you get a copy of a book by a writer named David Gaughran. His name is spelled Gaughran. I had to send him an email the other day and say, David, how do you spell your last name? And he said it was Gaughran. So David Gaughran has a book out called Let's Get Digital, that's all about the digital publishing industry. He walks you through step by step by step, the writing, the editing, the formatting, the publishing. It's a great book. I bought it when it first came out. He just released a new revised edition of it here a few months ago, which is good because everything in indie publishing changes very rapidly. And if you're interested in getting a book out there, to me, that's a great place to start. Get that book, read it, and like I say, drop me a line either at my Facebook page or at shawninman@gmail.com, and I'm happy to do anything I can to help you. To me, being a writer is not we're not fighting for the same reader. We're fighting to just put out good stories and to create good stories. So I was lucky that I had a bunch of really good writers who helped me when I was first getting started, and my way of paying them back for that is to help other writers now that they're getting started. So I guess that's it. That's my very first video blog, vlog, what do you call it? I don't know. I need a better name for it. So help me out. Send me a suggestion. Send me something clever. And if I use it, I'll send you a couple of free books. So till next time, Shawn Inmon, over and out.